and through you to the members of the committee, I want to thank you all for your leadership in trying to get a handle on what's obviously very important issues affecting not only the Gulf, but obviously the oil industry and many other industries throughout the country. You have a very great responsibility. And Ranking Member Murkowski, thank you also for your guidance and a lot of what we've been working on. And I'm here obviously to talk about the Oil Spill Prevention and Mitigation Improvement Act of 2010. And there are other colleagues that I have great respect for that are trying to do the same thing, and I'm hopeful that between the three of us we can potentially come up with a solid bill that will aid and assist not only the committee but obviously address some of the very serious things that we're faced with today. I'm in co-sponsorship with Senator Dianne Feinstein. Senator Stabenow obviously recently jumped on as well. And as you know, for over 2 months, our country has watched as millions of gallons of oil have washed up in the Gulf of Mexico after the collapse of the Deepwater Horizon oil rig. And oil continues to wash up on beaches along the Gulf Coast, covering wildlife, destroying ecosystems, and further hurting the region's fragile economy. And efforts to stop the leak continue to hit a snag. Significant roadblocks are common, and the oil keeps spewing from the ocean floor. And just yesterday we learned that the undersea robot bumped a venting system which forced BP to remove the cap. They have since replaced the cap, but it just shows how the leak isn't quite under control, as we're learning every day. And there's a universal agreement that this is the worst man-made environmental disaster in our nation's history. And even more troubling are the startling details emerging that this all could have been avoided. BP was astonishingly unprepared and ill-equipped to deal with the leak. And worse yet, the federal government has acknowledged that oil companies have not been held to the highest standard that we demand when it comes to having a fail-safe response plan in place to deal with spills in deep water. I find that unacceptable, Mr. Chairman, and I know you all do too. And while everyone understands that accidents can certainly happen, Americans are rightly furious that there was neither a viable nor urgent response plan in place to stop the leak or begin mitigating the damages. And while no one expects people to zip down there with a wetsuit to plug the leak, they do expect the emergency mitigation plans to be executed in a timely manner so they can protect the environmental impact that are affecting many of the Gulf states now. And to address this glaring error, not only me but my colleagues have filed legislation that require oil companies to have a viable, peer-reviewed plan, response plan to respond to significant leaks. The objective outside scientists and experts should be vetting these plans as well to make sure that they are viable. And the fact that the Mineral Management Service approved the existing boilerplate plans written by BP and other major oil companies, full of references to dead scientists and non-existent Gulf walruses, rightly undermines our faith in objective standards and proper regulation of this situation. And the act being proposed would require BP and other oil companies to do due diligence and provide a thorough, feasible, and peer-reviewed response plan before any new offshore drilling lease can be issued. Specifically, these response plans must also be certified by the Secretary of the Interior, who obviously has his hands full right now, but he will have to prescribe the means and timeline for containment of a spill and be specifically tailored to depth and location where the drilling occurs. This is an essential step for preventing other types of disasters as we've seen here from happening in the future. And what I believe frustrates the American people the most has been the lack of a clear and concise response plan that utilizes all available resources. We should have had the best and most brilliant scientists and engineers, oil folks, citizens in the world, administration officials, military in the world together to stop this spill and figure out how to remedy the impacts of this extreme environmental disaster. And to address this need, this legislation, Mr. Chairman, would immediately use and redirect existing funds through the Department of Energy's Deepwater program to build a team comprised of private sector engineers and experts from the National Academy of Sciences and others to stop the leak and mitigate the damage to wildlife, the environment, and businesses in the region, and recommend best practices moving forward. Obviously, we have a problem, we have to stop it right now, but we have to move forward and make sure that this doesn't happen again, and if it does, how do we deal with it quickly and effectively? And most importantly, well, I shouldn't say most importantly, finally, we should find out what went wrong. There's been much confusion about what existing authorities and resources the administration can and should be using to stop the spill and protect the environment in the Gulf. And our bill would require the GAO to investigate whether or not the administration has used all existing authorities and resources to respond to the spill, and to make recommendations if new authorities are needed. And as you know, Mr. Chairman, the estimates show that at least 80 million gallons of crude oil have leaked into our water so far, and the number keeps climbing on a daily basis. And we need to do something to stop this. And equally important, we must put a viable prevention and response plan in place to make sure that we can react quickly and decisively should the unthinkable ever happen again. And this Oil Spill Prevention and Mitigation Improvement Act, along with other suggestions from my colleagues and your efforts and those of the committees, I'm hopeful we'll take a common sense approach to do just that. And I would just ask Mr. Chairman and members of the committee that when you do so, you include us together in a bipartisan manner to just solve the problem. It's time, to just move past the politics and just get down to business, because the people need it, our environment needs it, and we can do better, and I'm hopeful to be part of that process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you very much.